So there is among many people, certainly me and most of the people I talk to, a kind of collective dissatisfaction with the way things are working, with the way our institutions run. Our kids' teachers seem to be failing them. Our doctors don't know who the hell we are, and they don't have enough time for us. We certainly can't trust the bankers, and we certainly can't trust the brokers. They almost brought the entire financial system down. And even as we do our own work, all too often, we find ourselves having to choose between doing what we think is the right thing and doing the expected thing or the required thing or the profitable thing. So everywhere we look, pretty much across the board, we worry that the people we depend on don't really have our interests at heart. Or if they do have our interests at heart, we worry that they don't know us well enough to figure out what they need to do in order to allow us to secure those interests. They don't understand us. They don't have the time to get to know us. There are two kinds of responses that we make to this sort of general dissatisfaction. If things aren't going right, the first response is, let's make more rules. Let's set up a set of detailed procedures to make sure that people will do the right thing. Give teachers scripts to follow in the classroom so that even if they don't know what they're doing and don't care about the welfare of our kids, as long as they follow the scripts, our kids will get educated. Give judges a list of mandatory sentences to impose for crimes so that you don't need to rely on judges using their judgment. Instead, all they have to do is look up on the list what kind of sentence goes with what kind of crime. Impose limits on what credit card companies can charge in interest and on what they can charge in fees. More and more rules to protect us against an indifferent, uncaring set of institutions we have to deal with. Or maybe in addition to rules, let's see if we can come up with some really clever incentives so that even if the people we deal with don't particularly want to serve our interests, it is in their interest to serve our interest. The magic incentives that will get people to do the right thing even out of pure selfishness. So we offer teachers bonuses if the kids they teach score passing grades on these big test scores that are used to evaluate the quality of school systems. Rules and incentives, sticks and carrots. We passed a bunch of rules to regulate the financial industry in response to the recent collapse. There's the Dodd-Frank Act, there's the new Consumer Financial Protection Agency that is temporarily being headed through the back door by Elizabeth Warren. Maybe these rules will actually improve the way these financial services companies behave. We'll see. In addition, we are struggling to find some way to create incentives for people in the financial services industry that will have them more interested in serving the long-term interests, even of their own companies, rather than securing short-term profits. So if we find just the right incentives, they'll do the right thing, as I said, selfishly. And if we come up with the right rules and regulations, they won't drive us all over a cliff. What we desperately need, beyond or along with better rules and reasonably smart incentives, is we need virtue. We need character. We need people who want to do the right thing. And in particular, the virtue that we need most of all is the virtue that Aristotle called practical wisdom. Practical wisdom is the moral will to do the right thing and the skill, the moral skill, to figure out what the right thing is. So Aristotle was very interested in watching how the craftsmen around him worked. And he was impressed at how they would improvise novel solutions to novel problems, problems that they hadn't anticipated. So one example is he sees these stonemasons working on the Isle of Lesbos, and they need to measure out round columns. Well, if you think about it, it's really hard to measure out round columns using a ruler. So what do? They fashion a novel solution to the problem. They created a ruler that bends, what we would call these days a tape measure. A flexible rule, a rule that bends. And Aristotle said, they appreciated that sometimes to design rounded columns, you need to bend the rule. And Aristotle said, often in dealing with other people, we need to bend the rules. Dealing with other people demands a kind of flexibility that no set of rules can encompass. Wise people know when and how to bend the rules. Wise people know how to improvise. The way my co-author, Ken, and I talk about it, they are kind of like jazz musicians. The rules are like the notes on the page, and that gets you started, but then you dance around the notes on the page, coming up with just the right combination for this particular moment with this particular set of fellow players. So for Aristotle, the kind of rule bending, rule exception finding, and improvisation that you see in skilled craftsmen is exactly what you need to be a skilled moral craftsman. And in interactions with people, almost all the time, it is this kind of flexibility that's required. A wise person knows when to bend the rules, a wise person knows when to improvise, and most important, a wise person does this improvising and rule bending in the service of the right aims. If you are a rule bender and an improviser mostly to serve yourself, what you get is ruthless manipulation of other people. So it matters that you do this wise practice in the service of others and not in the service of yourself. And so the will to do the right thing is just as important as the moral skill of improvisation and exception finding. Together, they comprise practical wisdom, which Aristotle thought was the master virtue. Aristotle thought that practical wisdom was the key to happiness, and he was right. There's now a lot of research being done in psychology on what makes people happy, and the two things that jump out in study after study, I know this will come as a shock to all of you, the two things that matter most to happiness are love and work. Love, managing successfully relations with the people who are close to you and with the communities of which you are a part. Work, engaging in activities that are meaningful and satisfying. If you have that, good close relations with other people, work that's meaningful and fulfilling, you don't much need anything else. Well, to love well and to work well, you need wisdom. Rules and incentives don't tell you how to be a good friend, how to be a good parent, how to be a good spouse, or how to be a good doctor or a good lawyer or a good teacher. Rules and incentives are no substitutes for wisdom. Indeed, we argue, there is no substitute for wisdom. And so practical wisdom does not require heroic acts of self-sacrifice on the part of practitioners. In giving us the will and the skill to do the right thing, to do right by others, practical wisdom also gives us the will and the skill to do right by ourselves. Thanks. Thank you.